So for about an entire month, the most boring guy on YouTube, which by the way is me, became the not so boring guy on YouTube. I acted rich for an entire month and I learned a few things. First of all, it's very expensive. Second, it's actually pretty fun. And then thirdly, the things that actually I had the most fun doing tended to be the cheapest things possible. So in this video, I'm gonna tell you exactly what I learned from acting rich, what the takeaway actually was, and what I saw with a lot of people running the same experiment that I was doing, but they were actually trying to act rich, but they actually couldn't do it, and it actually caused them a lot of pain. In this video, I'm going to go over all of the details. And by the way, I got this idea from a book I read, and it's called Stop Acting Rich by Thomas J. Stanley, where he figured out, doing experiments and doing research and all that stuff, that basically most middle class people that try to act rich with the big homes, with the luxury cars, they're pretending to be rich based on what they see on TV. But those people aren't really the wealthy people. The wealthy people tend to be very modest, have normal cars, live in normal homes, and they tend to be in their 50s. So they're actually not pretending to be rich. They're just actually acting like people that are acting like they're rich, but it actually makes no sense. And it's like a cycle of just like poor financial habits, okay? So as always, guys, like this video and top out, also subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified. Now, the very first thing is, guys, the only reason I ran this experiment and I felt comfortable doing it is because basically just recently I finished the financial freedom course. And by the way, that's my course. The link is down below if you want to buy it, but it basically means that I'm basically financially free. I can cover all my basics with passive income. I have no debt. I have a fully funded emergency account, and I also have a paid off home. Now, I always say this, okay? It's one thing to know what you need to do. It's another thing to be able to accomplish it. So although I knew that information for years now, it took me years to actually finish it. And because I have extra income now, I'm able to have a little bit more fun. And I said, let's go ahead and pretend to be rich for an entire month. And here's what I learned. First of all, I spent some money on some stuff. So I went ahead, I bought an iPhone, I bought some clothes, and I bought some stuff on Amazon. Now, here's the reason, okay? An iPhone, because I had a 4-year-old phone. Clothes, because the last clothes that I basically had, they came from Goodwill, because I shopped at Goodwill for years, okay? That's where most of my clothes came from. So I took advantage of Black Friday. I bought some expensive clothes for relatively cheap, and I basically just invested in the look per se. I still can't fix this part, but you know, just have some nice clothes or whatever. And I bought some stuff. Now, I also spent money on experiences. By far, this was actually the most rewarding, because to actually do things, to run experiences, to hang out with friends, to eat at fancy places. By the way, I went to a few restaurants with fancy ocean views, and guess what? It's nice. Like, it's nice to do nice things, but you kind of figure out that eating a $20 burger or an $8 Five Guy burger or smash burger, relatively to taste, is pretty much the same thing, you know? Now, I also spent money on people, like buying gifts and fixing problems for people. And what I learned is that that is actually pretty cool, to give, to fix, and to see someone actually get out of a situation they can help themselves out of, and you actually be able to help them. That made me feel amazing. But overall, I also figured out along the way that I'm actually pretty much like a weirdo. And here's why. Because when I did the experiences, when I bought the clothes, when I bought the stuff, when I helped people overall, I didn't feel different with different clothes on. I didn't feel different with a different phone. I just felt like, got a phone and I got some clothes. Great stuff. I like the clothes. And when I went to these fancy restaurants, it was just like, it was cool, but I didn't really care much for it. And on top of that, you know, to go to that restaurant, we had to go to this place, okay? This place is called Casa de Campo. It's so expensive. It's like luxurious. Like you have to spend like $400 a night to stay there. Now, thankfully, we have a friend in common. So the friend lives there and said, we're going to invite you in. That way we can just go to a restaurant directly. So we didn't spend $400 just to go to a restaurant. That's stupid. But I wondered, and I was like, you know what? The best part of the experience was basically driving there, having a conversation, making fun of the waiter and his fancy talk about this is so delightful and whatever. Like, that was hilarious to me. But overall, I'm a weirdo, so I don't really care much for the fancy things. I care more about like what money does for me, like independence, to be able to hang out with friends, to have control over my time. That's what I really care about, and that's what I learned. Now, here's something else I want to mention, right? And it's basically, in that book I told you guys about, like Stop Acting Rich by Thomas J. Stanley, he talks about how you never know exactly what somebody actual pocket, what their wealth, what their net worth actually looks like. And I realized this in a very small way. I have a friend, and this friend of mine is a lot more different like than I am. And I don't judge him based on this because everybody's different in a way, right? So he's like, if we go to a fancy place, he will basically enjoy that moment to the fullest. He will just be like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. He will take pictures and be like, oh my gosh, check this out and check that out. Well, I'm just there just like having a conversation, and I'm like, this is cool, but I don't really care about it. And he's just like really, really, really like involved in this moment, which is great in a sense, but he tends to go overboard. He tends to do things he actually can't handle financially. And he tends to enjoy the moment, then go back home and feel guilty because he spent way too much money. It's like this cycle of, I deserve something nice, so I'm gonna do it, but then you can't afford it, and you go right back to feeling sad about it. The answer is this cycle of poverty. And when I went to this fancy place like Casa de Campo, $400 a night or whatever, I asked myself, all these people that are here, I wonder how many people are on the edge of insolvency, on the edge of, I can't afford this, on the edge of, what if I lose everything just because they're trying to keep up appearances. And in the book, he talks about that. Whenever you see someone driving a Porsche or a BMW or a Maserati or a Lamborghini or whatever it is, that doesn't tell you they're wealthy. They're just cues, right? It tells you, well, if they're not wealthy, they must have some really good credit to be able to afford that. But whenever you see somebody in a fancy car, all you know is basically they're either $100,000 in debt or they no longer have $100,000, So the overall idea is, don't let perspective make you think that something is what it isn't, okay? And on top of that, don't be so in a rush to experience the nice things that you kind of forfeit being able to actually accomplish those things, So like my friend, he loves the fancy things. He can't afford them right now, but he's not really willing, at least just now, to make the sacrifices so eventually he can afford them without having to worry about every single dollar he's spending at these places. By the way, there's this great story by Grant Cardone. Is it Grant Cardone or is it Ramit Sethi? One of those guys. They're both great guys, okay? And he says, if you're gonna buy a $200 pair of Ray-Bans and you lose them at a restaurant and you're losing your mind about it, you probably can't afford them. But if you have a $200 like pair of Ray-Bans, like the glasses, and you lose them at a restaurant, you're like, ah, man, I lost them, but whatever, like, let's just go buy another one. That's probably a sign you can afford them. Like, it's still $200, but if that whole $200 like messes up your whole week, your whole month, you probably shouldn't be buying $200 glasses. The point is, wait until you can afford those things before you actually go ahead and buy them. That's why so many people, they fall into just debt and into trouble, and that's not really where you want to end up. So what's the takeaway here, guys? First of all, acting rich, it's very expensive, okay? It costs a lot of money, and I realize that. And I also realize that it's very foolish and stupid to act like something you're not just yet. And that's one of the biggest takeaways. So although you can go to these fancy restaurants and resorts and all these things, if you can't afford them, it keeps you away from financial freedom. And whenever you're trying to act rich, you're pretty much just pretending to be the wrong person, because the real wealthy people, again, they're modest people. They're first generation, on average, millionaires. They take years to become wealthy. On average, they're in their 50s. They drive average cars like Toyota and Mazdas and Hondas. They're not making, for example, mansions. They live in modest homes. They're just normal, regular people that you cannot tell, because at the end of the day, to get wealthy is to be patient, to respect money, to compound money, to let money work for you, to have the option to do something but say, I'm not going to do that just yet. I'd rather have the actual benefit of what wealth actually means. And at the core level, to me, wealth just means three things: to be independent, to have control over my time, and to be able to spend time with the people I love and love me. And that's the biggest takeaway. Now, what aspects of this rich lifestyle am I going to keep? Well, first of all, I'm gonna keep the aspect of being open to new experiences, to be able to travel, to go to some restaurants, to try different things out. But I'm not really a big fan of the very fancy things, because at that point it's just stupid. Because I realized that whenever I went to a restaurant that was like, you know, like modest, and I went to an expensive one, the difference wouldn't be really that crazy. It would just be like more like in appearances and the people that are there. And then it would kind of be like just like the waiters, and they would be like talking like in fancy accents, and I really wouldn't get it. And I would be like, I'm not interested in any of this stuff, okay? So at the core level, the most important thing is know yourself and know that none of these things is actually gonna make you better or different or whatever. It's nice to be able to have clothes that don't come from Goodwill once in a while, okay? It's nice to have an iPhone, but it's not nice. It's actually foolish and stupid to buy things you can't afford just yet. So if you wanna achieve financial freedom, just spend less than you make, invest the difference, don't get into debt. If you want a guide to get there, you can get the course, the link is down below. But at the core level, finance is simple. It's just spend less than you make and copy the real millionaires. And the real millionaires, not the people you see, for example, on camera and in social media. Most of them are very quiet. They're very normal. They're very average. And that's what I've learned. And that's what I really love. You know, so overall, guys, thanks for watching. Like this video. On top, also subscribe. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, comment down below real wealth, so I know you made it all the way to the end. As always, guys, up here is another video, a banger. Over here is my face. Don't subscribe. And as always, long-term team officially out. I said as always about 4 times, and that's always not enough. Peace.